Look, I think that every lawyer intends to follow the professional rules of conduct, and that's there's been every intention to do that in this case, and we believe we've followed the professional rules of conduct.
And Justin, throughout all of it, is very kind, upfront, and it's so clear to me now, based on what we're seeing and why they wouldn't want these text messages out, Blake's team, because it's incredibly.
I never wanted to be part of Hollywood's hidden scandals, but after witnessing what Blake Lively was doing behind closed doors, silence was no longer an option. This week, powerhouse attorney Bryan Freedman shattered the industry's facade with a stunning confession, exposing Blake Lively's alleged scheme to undermine Justin Baldoni and her shocking betrayal of Ryan Reynolds. Known for protecting celebrity secrets, Freedman has now become the whistleblower no one expected. What drove him to speak out after years of silence may forever alter how the world views America's so-called golden girl.
And the reality is that had there been these horrible things, and had there been these horrible text messages, had there been this horrible information, that stuff would have.
Blake Lively's rise to fame wasn't just a Hollywood success story. It was, according to Bryan Freedman, a masterclass in image manipulation. When she first appeared as Serena Vanderwoodson in Gossip Girl, America fell in love with the blonde bombshell who seemed to have it all: beauty, charm, and that approachable girl-next-door allure. But Freedman claims that behind the perfect smile and glossy Instagram posts was a meticulously calculated plan to dominate Hollywood. After Gossip Girl ended, Blake didn't simply move on to film roles. She strategically rebranded herself as the industry's golden girl, choosing projects that bolstered her image while conveniently launching her lifestyle brand, Preserve, which folded just as her acting career needed new momentum. According to insiders close to Freedman, Blake was known for charming powerful directors and producers in public, only to disparage them behind closed doors. She could flip the switch in seconds. One source recalled, "One moment, she's laughing with someone at a party. The next, she's tearing them down to her team." Crew members also came forward with stories of a cold, demanding personality off camera, an actress who berated staff over minor details like lukewarm coffee or someone standing in her eyeline. While Blake curated her image as the ultimate wife and mother figure online, those perfect family photos and witty captions often masked chaos behind the scenes. Freedman's sources allege that moments before those snapshots were taken, she'd been shouting at assistants or creating tension on set. Her marriage to Ryan Reynolds, long seen as a beacon of humor and partnership, reportedly became a calculated move to strengthen her own brand. Insiders claim Blake used Ryan's fame and likability to elevate her public profile, even steering some of his career decisions to align with her own ambitions. Behind the smiles, Freedman alleges, was a woman fiercely protective of her crafted image, one willing to silence critics through intimidation. Multiple industry sources told him about legal threats, NDAs, and subtle blacklisting tactics that kept her reputation intact. "People were terrified to cross her," said one production coordinator. "If you spoke out, you'd suddenly stop getting calls for work." Over time, the cracks in Blake's flawless facade began to show, snapping at fans when caught off guard, making cutting remarks about colleagues during interviews that were later scrubbed from the record, and letting glimpses of frustration slip when cameras weren't supposed to be rolling. To the world, she was Hollywood's radiant sweetheart. But to those who worked closest to her, Freedman suggests, Blake Lively's charm was less a reflection of who she was and more a weapon she wielded to stay on top.
That every lawyer intends to follow the professional rules of conduct, and that's there's been every intention to do that in this case, and we believe we've followed the professional rules of conduct, and the professional rule of conduct at issue, talks about an exception, and that exception is when your client is prejudiced by public information that's not generated by you, but in fact generated by a third party or the other party. And all we're trying to do is have a fair process. That's all.
I got to tell you, I have covered so many cases. O.J. Simpson case was my life for a long, long time. And Rodney King was my life. And every day, both sides tried to prejudice the jury pool. And ultimately, it didn't matter. And that's what lawyers do anyway. They're not there to say, I'm just going to be a straight shooter. They're advocates. The idea that you can taint a jury by holding a news conference and talking about a text, to me, is so ridiculous. And you look at O.J. Simpson, and, I reported every day there was blood going from the bodies to his bathroom, and he was acquitted. So the idea that a jury is somehow going to remember what Bryan Freedman or the other side said, a year before a trial, to me is just, I think the rule is stupid. Both of you guys represent a lot of famous people, and that trials are kind of two-pronged. One, you want to win the case that's before you, but then you want to make sure that the person's life is okay once the trial is over, and that they still have a career, and they can make money, they can support their family. And that element is what lawyers do outside the courtroom. And so I always thought, when judges say, no, muzzle yourself, they're not allowing you to fully represent a client.
I don't think that's what the judge is saying at all, is muzzle yourself. I think the judge is really saying, act in accordance with, professional, the professional rules.
But what does that mean? What does that mean?
I think it means that if there's prejudice to your client as a result of something that you didn't cause, that was caused by someone else or something else, that you are allowed to put forth evidence to make sure that that prejudice is remedied.
And Justin, throughout all of it, is very kind, upfront, and it's so clear to me now, based on what we're seeing and why they wouldn't want these text messages out, Blake's team, because it's incredibly revealing. At this point, Blake needs to put this out there. Now, brilliant move doing it this way. Now it's part of a lawsuit. It's not actually the website to the press. This is part of an amended complaint, so technically it's a response, and it's due to new information they've discovered, which legally they're not allowed to do. So it's wild. It's only going to get wild.
Those tense moments caught on camera weren't random outbursts. They were early signs of a much bigger storm brewing behind the scenes of It Ends With Us. When Justin Baldoni cast Blake Lively as Lily Bloom opposite Israel Conson, the industry celebrated the pairing as a perfect blend of talent and star power. At the press launch, Justin praised Blake's depth as an actress, while she smiled graciously beside him. But insiders claim that beneath that polished exterior, Blake was already orchestrating a quiet power grab that would leave Justin blindsided and struggling for control of his own project. According to multiple crew members, Blake arrived on set with an agenda disguised as creative collaboration. A production assistant revealed she'd wait for Justin to step away before whispering notes to the cinematographer or questioning the script supervisor. At first, it seemed harmless, just input from a passionate lead, the PA said. But soon it became obvious she was undermining his authority, one small decision at a time. Reports suggest Blake began lobbying for major script changes that shifted emotional weight and screen time toward her character while subtly minimizing Justin's role. She framed it as amplifying the female voice, one script supervisor shared. But in reality, she was reshaping the story around herself. The tension escalated when Blake allegedly brought in her own editing team without Justin's approval. One morning, he reportedly walked into the editing suite to find unfamiliar faces recutting footage under her direction, altering sequences to weaken his creative influence while highlighting her performance. He was furious, recalled a post-production coordinator. It was his film, and she'd hijacked the edit. Yet the most unsettling claims involve Blake's alleged campaign to tarnish Justin's reputation. Several insiders confirmed she began circulating whispers about his controlling behavior on set, hinting at discomfort during intimate scenes. She knew exactly what she was doing, a camera operator explained. She dropped comments just loud enough to create suspicion. The situation imploded when Justin discovered Blake had been holding private meetings with studio executives, showing them her own alternative cuts and implying the project needed new leadership. A producer described the fallout. Justin confronted her in her trailer, and the shouting echoed across the lot. He felt utterly betrayed. She was trying to take his film away from him. By that point, the production had splintered into factions, some loyal to Justin, others aligning with Blake. It turned toxic fast, admitted a supporting actor. People were forced to pick sides. The breaking point came when Blake allegedly threatened to quit unless she was granted co-director credit and final edit approval. With millions already invested and production on the line, the studio caved. She had them cornered, a coordinator said. Justin had no choice but to compromise just to finish. Attorney Bryan Freedman, originally brought on for routine legal oversight, reportedly witnessed the meltdown firsthand. He's seen Hollywood power plays before, said a source close to him, but this wasn't creative conflict. It was the deliberate dismantling of a director's authority.
When you saw, Ryan, make light of the situation, I guess, try to find some humor in all this.
I'm unaware of anybody, frankly, whose wife has been sexually harassed and has made jokes about that type of situation. I can't think of anyone who's done anything like that, and so it surprised me.
So I got to tell you, all I'm thinking in my head is one word: deposition. Because when Ryan Reynolds sits for a deposition, if it gets that far...
Tell us about when you went in for the meeting and going over the script with SNL.
Well, what I'm thinking
decision?
What I'm thinking is, what Bryan Freedman is going to say is, so you were upset that you say your wife was harassed? And he's going to say yes. And he's going to say, yet you kind of made a joke of it, or made a joke of it.
Well,
that's what he'll say.
More than asking Ryan, he's going to put that question to Blake, because she's sitting there, she's party to it, and reacting to the lines.
You're going to do it with both, but you're going to do it with Ryan.
Right.
You're going to do it
but
with
my
both.
point is, did you say to Blake, you
were sitting there, you
so
co-signed
upset.
on it. You co-signed on it.
Behind the picture-perfect Instagram posts and the witty red carpet banter hid a marriage far more fragile than the public ever imagined. According to sources close to Bryan Freedman, Blake Lively's controlling tendencies didn't stop at the studio door. They extended deep into her marriage with Ryan Reynolds, creating what one insider chillingly described as a golden cage disguised as perfection. To the world, they were Hollywood's power couple, but behind closed doors, the dynamic was anything but balanced. Ryan's affable, good guy persona became Blake's most powerful weapon. Whenever things went south, she'd push Ryan into the spotlight, said a longtime friend of the couple who confided in Freedman. His charm was her cover. The world saw his smile and forgot her mistakes. Insiders allege that Blake strategically positioned Ryan as both her public protector and a tool to elevate her brand. Whenever criticism surfaced, she used his credibility to deflect attention and quietly took credit for the very decisions that defined his career. But the facade began to crumble when whispers emerged about Blake's behind-the-scenes influence over Ryan's professional path. A veteran talent agent revealed that 3 major film projects Ryan was deeply invested in collapsed after Blake met privately with producers. She'd raise impossible contract demands or imply he'd lost interest, the agent explained. It was sabotage disguised as strategy. These roles, insiders claim, could have redefined Ryan as a serious dramatic actor, something Blake allegedly saw as a threat to her curated family-friendly image. Ryan reportedly had no idea how far the interference went. A production executive told Freedman that Blake often sabotaged potential partnerships under the guise of protecting his brand. She'd charm people, then plant small doubts, just enough to poison future collaborations, the executive said. The manipulation didn't end there. Blake allegedly began inserting herself into Ryan's business ventures, particularly his aviation gin enterprise, showing up uninvited to meetings and pushing branding ideas that better fit her aesthetic. She'd override his plans, insisting she knew what audiences wanted, a marketing consultant shared. Ryan would later find out entire campaigns had been altered. The most unsettling moment came when Blake reportedly interfered in Ryan's charitable work. A nonprofit director recalled receiving altered contracts with unfamiliar clauses and unexpected financial terms. When we called to confirm, Blake answered, saying she had power of attorney, the director said. It was bizarre, and Ryan had no idea. Sources say this wasn't an isolated event. Blake routinely made major decisions without Ryan's knowledge, even signing his name to correspondence and commitments. The turning point came when Ryan discovered emails Blake had sent under his name, rejecting a collaboration with a female director he'd long admired. He was crushed, recalled a personal assistant present for the confrontation. It wasn't just betrayal, it was realizing he'd lost years of autonomy to someone he thought he could trust. Around the same time, Ryan reportedly learned about Blake's manipulative behavior toward Justin Baldoni on the It Ends With Us set. That revelation, sources say, shattered the last illusion he had of their partnership. For Bryan Freedman, watching it unfold was unbearable. A source close to him said, he saw a man completely broken, betrayed not just as a husband, but as a human being. Witnessing Ryan's devastation and Blake's relentless control tactics was reportedly the moment Freedman decided enough was enough. Breaking his silence, he claimed, wasn't about vengeance. It was about exposing the truth behind Hollywood's most polished illusion.
Comment from Bryan Freedman. The decision to amend our lawsuit was a logical next step due to the overwhelming amount of new proof that has come to light. This fresh evidence corroborates what we knew all along, that due to pure egotistical reasons, Miss Lively and her entire team colluded for months to destroy reputations through a complex web of lies, false accusations, and manipulation of illicitly received communications. The ongoing public interest in this case online has ironically shed light on the undeniable facts pertaining to the New York Times and how heavily Miss Lively and her representatives were not only deeply involved in the attempted takedown and smear campaign of Mr. Baldoni, Wayfair Studios, and their teams, but that they themselves initiated it. Now, what this actually means is that all those TikToks and metadata that we've been reporting on, and so many of you guys have been reporting on, it's been making a difference. As teams getting it, and it's affecting this case. It's bringing new evidence to light. So we should not stop. We are not harassing. We are doing our homework. And I think Blake Lively and team are very terrified by it. And that all those TikToks, metadata, etc., are the reason for this amended complaint. And in a brilliant move, I got to say, by their legal team,
Freedman's discovery of Ryan's betrayal was merely the doorway to a much darker story. What Blake had done to her husband and co-star wasn't some rare misstep. It was part of a disturbing, well-established pattern that Freedman had quietly tracked for years. At first, I thought it was typical Hollywood gossip, said one source close to him, but Bryan showed me a file so massive it looked like an old phone book. Inside were years' worth of complaints, testimonies, and whispered warnings. Former actresses who crossed paths with Blake described an eerily consistent pattern. She'd welcome you into her circle, learn your vulnerabilities, then quietly erase you once you started gaining attention. She'd pretend to support you, then suddenly your calls stopped getting returned, and projects you'd been promised just vanished, shared one former co-star. Insiders claimed Blake maintained an unspoken never work with list, featuring anyone she viewed as competition. Makeup artists, assistants, and especially actresses under 35 who drew praise after working with her. Even more chilling were accusations of creative theft. A costume designer recounted how Blake photographed her original sketches, then later passed them off as her own vision in press interviews. Casting directors echoed similar stories, alleging Blake used leaked audition materials to sabotage competitors by spreading false tips about what directors wanted. Crew members described her as a smiling storm, recalling how she'd get multiple people fired by sending quiet complaints to producers under the guise of professionalism. I saw her have 7 crew members replaced in one shoot, said a sound technician. She'd compliment your work 1 minute, and by lunch you were packing your gear. When confronted, Blake reportedly weaponized her public image as a devoted mother, turning criticism into sympathy. She'd start talking about her kids, how tired she was, and suddenly people backed off, remembered one assistant. One of the most shocking incidents in Freedman's records came from a 2019 charity gala. Blake allegedly approached a rising actress who had just landed a role Blake had wanted. She smiled, handed her champagne, and whispered, "Enjoy it while it lasts. I know things about the director you don't." Within 2 weeks, the actress was mysteriously recast. To many, these stories painted a portrait of a woman obsessed with control and terrified of losing relevance. For Freedman, it was the final confirmation that the carefully polished image of Hollywood's golden girl concealed something far more calculated and far more dangerous.
Reveal what really happened. A campaign to tarnish Lively after she alleged that Justin Baldoni, her co-star and director, and Jamie Heath, the producer, had engaged in misconduct while shooting the film.
Now, again, keyword there, the alleged smear campaign, but listen to what Megan herself, the author, says.
In a legal complaint Lively filed on Friday, private text messages and other documents that we've obtained reveal what really happened.
So right there, Chris, that's not an opinion. That's not a maybe. That's not a what really happened. Now, is that going to be problematic for them moving forward?
Well, it's significant. So in the United States, where this lawsuit is pending, it's very difficult to sue a journalist, media outlet, because we have this First Amendment protection for the press. And that's super important because powerful people, would be able to destroy a journalist or media outlet by suing them for defamation or libel and keep them from reporting the truth. And so we have given, as a matter of policy, massive protections for the media and other journalists to fairly comment on stories that have not been proven to be true yet or not, so we can get this word out here. Now, and that's what the New York Times is coming back and saying, look, we're not Blake Lively. We're not the ones making the allegation. We're just fairly reporting on what Blake is suing Justin and Wayfarer for. And if that's all they did, they would be absolutely protected. But that's not what happened. According to this video that we're seeing, that clip, they're going in vouching for the story. That's where they made the mistake. If they would have said, Blake alleges that, or according to Blake, blah, 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 this happened, they'd be protected. But they said, and her title is investigative journalist. So she's investigative journalist for the New York Times. So that is implying that she's done an investigation. She's actually looked in this. We can trust her. We can trust the New York Times. They've done their vetting. That's the representation impliedly it's being made. And she's saying, yes, there's a lawsuit by Blake, but we, the New York Times, have looked into it, and this is what really happened. So now they're stating as a fact, not as an opinion, that this happened, and that's how they're going to get into trouble.
Behind that charity gala incident lay something far more sinister than petty rivalry. Bryan Freedman's private safe, known among insiders as the Vault of Blake Files, held evidence that could dismantle Blake Lively's pristine public persona forever. These weren't whispers or gossip, but verifiable proof. For months, Freedman wrestled with his professional conscience. He built a career on confidentiality, yet continuing to protect Blake meant enabling serious harm. His moral conflict deepened after discovering a disturbing series of text messages between Blake and her publicist. Need to plant stories about Jay's behavior. One read, "Find someone willing to say he made them uncomfortable. Nothing provable." Another instructed her team to kill that interview after a crew member agreed to speak about conditions on set. Still, the messages were nothing compared to the audio file that eventually surfaced, a recording secretly made by a production assistant inside Blake's trailer. "If you ever repeat what you saw, I'll make sure you never work in this town again," Blake's voice threatened coldly. "Do you know how many casting directors call me for recommendations?" This conversation never happened. She detailed how she'd ruined the assistant's reputation by spreading false stories of theft. Her tone was calm, calculated, and terrifyingly deliberate. Freedman realized he wasn't dealing with momentary anger, but premeditated manipulation. Then came the financial records, large consulting payments to former employees appearing immediately after incidents on set. One makeup artist, allegedly berated until she broke down, received $75,000 followed by a lifetime NDA. The pattern was undeniable. But the document that broke Freedman's restraint was a spreadsheet innocuously titled Career Competition. It cataloged actresses in Blake's age range, ranking them by popularity, media favorability, and, most chillingly, vulnerability factors. Next to certain names were instructions on how to undermine their careers, including which directors to quietly dissuade from casting them. When I realized my client was strategizing to destroy other women's livelihoods, I couldn't stay silent. Freedman confided to a close associate. This wasn't ambition, it was systemic sabotage. The final blow came when he discovered that Blake's legal team had drafted cease and desist letters targeting 3 former crew members preparing to talk to the press. The letters contained subtle but unmistakable threats, referencing private family details that had no place in legal correspondence. That was the moment Freedman understood. This wasn't just a client's misconduct. It was a pattern of coercion, intimidation, and psychological warfare disguised as Hollywood professionalism. It was the kind of truth that, once seen, could never be unseen.
His attorneys told TMZ, "We are pleased with the result of today's hearing and eager to move forward immediately with the discovery in this case. The court granted our request that all attorneys in the matter actually follow the rule of the law and not make any statements that could prejudice a jury. This case deals with serious allegations of SH and retaliation. We will hold the defendants accountable, and we will be confident that once all the evidence is submitted in the matter, Miss Lively will prevail." Okay, well, we'll see. That's Blake Lively's side trying to declare it a win because, the judge did sort of say you must follow the law, but Justin Baldoni's team clearly also declaring the win, as TMZ is also reporting it, scored a legal win because there was no gag order placed. That's what Blake Lively was trying to do. Blake was also trying to not have this lawyer, Bryan Freedman, depose her, and she lost that as well. So while they're spinning it in their favor, yes, Bryan's got to be a little bit more careful. Clearly, he's still out there making statements, just like Blake Lively's team is doing. He doesn't seem to be releasing anything else, and I suspect we're going to start getting less from this side as evidence and filings.
Those cease and desist letters didn't just backfire. They transformed Bryan Freedman from a silent insider into Hollywood's most explosive whistleblower. Within hours of his revelations going public, the industry went into full-scale panic mode. Studio phone lines lit up as executives scrambled to assess the fallout and determine how deeply Blake Lively's name was tied to ongoing projects. Blake's camp immediately launched what insiders dubbed Operation Damage Control, a desperate, 3-phase campaign built on denial, deflection, and destruction. Her publicist began burning up phone lines, calling in favors from sympathetic media outlets, while her lawyers sent threatening letters to anyone even considering speaking out. The irony is unbelievable. An entertainment journalist who received one of those letters remarked, "They're using the same intimidation tactics that Freedman exposed to silence people talking about their intimidation tactics." But by then, the dam had already broken. One by one, Blake's former colleagues began stepping into the light. A makeup artist who'd worked with her in 2017 told TMZ, "She got me fired because I complimented another actress more than her." A production coordinator from another film claimed, "She used to corner me alone and threatened to have me blacklisted if I didn't prioritize her demands over the director's." As more voices emerged, a disturbing pattern took shape, and Blake's attempts to suppress it only made things worse. Several industry professionals have confirmed receiving frantic late-night calls from Blake herself. She'd be sobbing one second and raging the next, recalled a former assistant director. She'd say, "You know this isn't true," and then immediately add, "I'll remember who stood by me when this is over." It was emotional blackmail. Meanwhile, studio executives began distancing themselves fast. 2 major production companies quietly placed Blake's upcoming films on indefinite hold, citing unresolved internal matters. A casting director from a top studio admitted, "We've been told to start scouting alternatives for her role in our next blockbuster. No one wants to become collateral damage." Even more telling was Ryan Reynolds' silence. As the scandal snowballed, he canceled 3 public appearances and vanished from social media entirely. "If your partner was being unfairly attacked, wouldn't you defend them publicly?" asked one veteran publicist. His silence says everything about what he believes. Behind the scenes, Blake's team shifted tactics again, recasting her as the victim of a smear campaign. Her reps began reaching out to celebrity friends, offering prudent statements and asking them to post supportive messages online. It was a full-court PR blitz designed to flip the narrative, portraying Freedman as a bitter former employee seeking revenge. The desperation peaked when a Blake-friendly blog published a sensational exclusive, alleging that Freedman had demanded $10 million to stay quiet. Within hours, The claim imploded after Freedman released emails proving Blake's team had actually offered him hush money to sign a stricter NDA, which he refused. The revelation destroyed the last shreds of her credibility. What began as one man's ethical crisis has snowballed into an industry-wide reckoning. Freedman's decision to expose the truth shattered the illusion of Hollywood's golden couple and cracked open a much deeper rot, one built on manipulation, fear, and silence. The fallout from his disclosures has left studio executives rattled, publicists on edge, and fans questioning how much of what they admire is real. For years, Hollywood has thrived on image over integrity, but now, that carefully painted mask is peeling away. The question is no longer whether Blake Lively can recover, it's whether the industry that protected her can ever be the same again. The spotlight has shifted, and this time, it's not turning away.